There's a certain kind of person who keeps ending up in the same story with different people. The names change, the pattern doesn't. Somehow the demanding friend, the volatile partner, the boss who takes and takes, they all seem to find their way to the same door. And at some point, this person asks the question, quietly, maybe late at night, why does this keep happening to me? Most people around them have a quick answer. Bad luck, poor judgment, a weakness for the wrong people. It's almost never that, because the people who attract toxic people are rarely weak and rarely foolish. Usually, they're the opposite, warm, perceptive, endlessly willing to understand. And that's exactly the problem. The very things that make them good are the things a toxic person is drawn to, like a signal. It shows up in patterns, small, specific ones, in what they tolerate, what they over-explain, and what they were taught long ago to do with their own needs. You might recognize a few of them, and one of them you probably learned before you were old enough to choose it. The first one is the easiest to mistake for kindness. Sign 1. They give people the benefit of the doubt long past the evidence. You can usually spot it in how they talk about someone who's hurting them. A friend brings up the thing that happened, the canceled plan, the cruel comment, the promise broken again, and they wait for the anger. It doesn't come. Instead, out comes the explanation. They've been under a lot of stress. They didn't mean it like that. There's probably a reason. Everyone else in the room can already see it. The pattern is obvious from the outside, but they're still standing there, holding the door open for the best possible version of a person who keeps walking through it to take something. It's not that they can't see the evidence. It's that they refuse to close the case while there's any story left that makes the other person okay. From the outside, this looks like naivety, poor judgment, a soft spot for people who don't deserve it. But watch closely, and it's something else. It's a deep, almost reflexive generosity. The instinct to understand before you judge, to assume pain behind bad behavior rather than malice. That's a good instinct. In most rooms, it makes them the kindest person there. The problem is that a manipulative person reads that generosity in about 5 minutes, and they know exactly what it means. It means the door doesn't lock. That brings us to sign 2. They treat other people's emotions as their responsibility. It shows up the moment someone else is in a bad mood. They walk into a room and instantly feel it. The tension, the irritation, the person sitting quietly with a cloud over them. And something in them activates. The day quietly reorganizes itself around one goal. Fix this. Smooth it over. Get everyone okay again. Nobody asked them to. That's the thing. The job was self-assigned a long time ago. To most people, another person's mood is just weather, something happening near them, not to them. To them, it's a fire, and they're the only one holding a bucket. There's a name for this quiet reflex: emotional over-responsibility, a sense of duty for feelings that were never theirs to manage. When someone nearby is upset, they don't just notice it, they feel accountable for it. From the outside, this looks like being caring, attentive, the considerate one who always checks in. And the care is real. That's what makes it hard to see clearly. But a wide-open willingness to manage other people's emotions is exactly the thing a difficult person is looking for, because it means their moods become someone else's problem to solve, for free, indefinitely. They're not being cared for in return. They're being billed. Sign 3 is where the kindness turns into something that traps them. Their empathy doesn't have an off switch. They can find the human story behind almost anyone, even the people who treat them badly. Especially the people who treat them badly, actually. Because those are the ones whose wounds feel most visible. They look at the toxic person and they don't just see the behavior, they see the frightened kid underneath it, the bad childhood, the reason. And once they've seen that, hurting them back feels cruel. Leaving feels like abandoning someone who's already been abandoned enough. You already know you always understand why people act the way they do. That part isn't news. Here's the part that might be. That understanding is the exact thing keeping you stuck. Empathy was supposed to be a way of connecting. Somewhere, it became a mandate to stay, a reason you owe your presence to anyone whose pain you can see. It's like reading someone's whole tragic backstory while they're quietly picking your pocket. You're so moved by the story that you don't feel the hand. What looked like compassion has quietly become a cage, and you built it yourself out of your best quality. Which leads into sign 4. They over-explain themselves to people who were never listening. When the mistreatment happens, they do a very specific thing. They explain, they clarify, they rephrase. They write the long message trying to lay out exactly why something hurt, certain that if they can just find the right words, the other person will finally understand and it'll stop. You know the message, the third one. Carefully worded, painfully honest, sent to someone who has never once changed their behavior because of anything you wrote. The belief underneath it is almost touching. They must not understand. If they understood, they wouldn't keep doing this. So they explain, again and again. But there's a difference most people this kind never let themselves see. The gap between someone who doesn't understand and someone who doesn't care. One is a communication problem. The other is a character one. And you cannot fix a character problem with a better paragraph. From the outside, this looks like over-communicating, being too much, too intense, too eager to hash everything out. It isn't that. It's a refusal to accept a painful fact, that the person across from them isn't confused. They understood the first time. They just weren't bothered by it. And no amount of explaining reaches someone who was never actually lost. And that exhaustion, explaining yourself over and over to someone committed to not getting it, that's a specific kind of tired. It's also a clue, because it raises a harder question. Why do the difficult ones hold your attention like this, when the easy ones never did? Sign 5. They confuse intensity with connection. Think about the calm, kind people who have drifted through your life. The steady ones, the ones who were genuinely good to you, and be honest about how they felt. A little flat, a little boring. Nice, but without that pull, that spark, that sense of something happening. Now think about the volatile ones, the chaos, the highs, the lows, the reconciliations that felt like the earth moving, that felt like passion, like depth, like the real thing. Here's the hard truth underneath that, said as gently as it can be. For a lot of people who attract toxic relationships, the intensity isn't a sign of connection. It's a nervous system misreading familiar chaos as chemistry. There's a name for it, trauma bonding. When someone grew up around volatility, their body learned to associate that particular anxiety, that up and down, with closeness, with love even. So calm doesn't feel like safety. It feels like absence, like something's missing. Layer 1, you might already know. The stable ones felt boring. Layer 2 is the part that's harder to sit with. It's because somewhere a long time ago, your body learned to call anxiety love, and it's been mistaking one for the other ever since. That wiring made complete sense once. It was accurate to the world you were in. It's just costing you now, in a world that no longer requires it. Sign 6. Their boundaries come with an apology attached. Watch what happens on the rare occasion they try to push back. They finally say no, but it comes wrapped in so much softening, so much apology, so much, "I'm so sorry, I feel terrible, I hope you understand," that by the end, it barely registered as a boundary at all. And then comes the worst part. The next hour spent reassuring, over-explaining, checking that the other person isn't upset, quietly dismantling the boundary in real time until it's like it was never there. To them, saying no feels like doing something wrong, so they apologize for the limit before anyone's even objected to it. From the outside, this looks like politeness, being accommodating, considerate to a fault. But a boundary that comes pre-apologized is a boundary that teaches people it can be pushed. It says, "I don't fully believe I'm allowed to have this. Press a little and I'll fold." And difficult people are exceptional at hearing that, which leaves a strange question hanging. Where does it even come from, this reflex to apologize for having needs at all? Because that one isn't a habit. It's older than that. Sign 7. They feel safer being needed than being loved. Here's something they almost never say out loud, even to themselves. They gravitate toward people who need something. Fixing, saving, managing, the project, the rescue, the person who's a mess but has so much potential. And they feel strangely, quietly uneasy with people who just love them, steadily,
asking for nothing, requiring no repair. Put them in a healthy relationship where nothing is wrong and something odd happens. They don't quite know who to be. There's no role, no fire to put out, no one to save, no way to earn their place. And that's the tell. Because for them, being needed feels secure. It's love you can earn, love with a job attached, love you can be sure of because you're useful. Being simply loved, for nothing, with no task to perform, feels unfamiliar, almost unsafe. Being indispensable feels safer than being cherished. Sit with that one, because most people who recognize it have never let themselves put it into words before. And that brings us to the last sign, the one that explains all the others. Sign 8. They learned this role before they could choose it. Where did all of this actually begin? Because it didn't start with the toxic partner, or the draining friend, or the boss who took and took. Trace every earlier sign back far enough, and they nearly all lead to the same place. A much younger version of them, in a home where love wasn't quite free, where it had to be earned by managing someone else. Maybe there was a parent whose moods ran the whole house. Maybe things were unstable, unpredictable, and a small child figured out that the way to stay safe was to read the room, keep the peace, and take care of everyone's feelings before their own. That child became the peacemaker, the little caretaker, the one who kept everyone okay, and got told in 1,000 small ways that this was what made them good, what made them lovable. No one handed them a choice about it. You don't choose the role that keeps you safe at 6 years old. You just become it, and then you forget it was ever a role at all. From the outside, it looks like they attract toxic people, like some magnet they can't switch off. But that's not quite what's happening. They were trained, early and thoroughly, to feel at home with exactly this kind of person. The demanding, the volatile, the ones whose love has to be earned by absorbing their chaos. That's not a stranger to them. That's the original dynamic, the first one that ever felt like love. They're not drawn to toxic people by accident. They're going home, and the pull will keep holding, quietly, faithfully, until the day they finally see it for what it is.
So put it all together, and here's what it isn't. It isn't weakness. It isn't bad luck. It isn't some flaw in their judgment that keeps picking the wrong people. It's a set of genuine strengths, deep empathy, real warmth, a gift for understanding people, bolted onto an old survival role that stopped protecting them a long time ago and never got the message to stand down. Attracting toxic people was never about the toxic people. It was a homing signal. They move toward what feels familiar, and for them, familiar meant earning love by carrying someone else's weight. Here's the shift, if any of this landed. It was never about becoming colder or harder or trusting less. It's about learning to feel the difference between a connection that needs saving and one that simply meets you, and letting that second kind stop registering as danger. Stop feeling like boredom. Stop feeling like something's missing, because nothing's missing. It's just quiet. And quiet was never the thing to be afraid of. The people who attract toxic people don't need to become harder. They need to stop mistaking the weight they carry for the love they're worth. That's the whole of it. Not a magnet for the wrong people. A good heart, still running an old map. If this one landed, the thread runs on into the people who can give endlessly and can't bring themselves to receive. That one's worth staying for too.